Hello and welcome to coverage of the World Magic Cup here from Amsterdam. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Zach Hill and Luis Scott Vargas. Take a look at our players here. Raphael Levy from France versus Belgium team. It's Marijn Libert, and it looks like a pretty ideal start for Raf. Luis.
So yeah, Raf, he has an elf on turn 1, which is pretty crucial to his deck. He said you didn't need to mulligan hands that didn't have elves, but going turn 1 elf into, as we see, an Elvish Archdruid is pretty much the ideal start for him.
Now Marijn Libert also led off with a mana elf. This one's an Elvish Mystic. Let's see what his turn 2 brings.
Yeah, so he's got Flint of Boar, Strangleroot Geist, Domery Raid. He's going to want to try and do something about that Archdruid before it gets out of hand, but he doesn't really have anything he can fight with right now with Domery, so he's going to want to commit something to the board. The question is whether he wants to block with Strangleroot Geist or attack with Flint of Boar.
Now, Luis, I think I saw Raphael Levy has Garruk Relentless in his hand. How important is that card in this matchup?
Its main use is actually killing the Elvish Mystic that's in play, since he wants to stop Thundermaw Hellkite from hitting the board for as long as he possibly can.
All right, so Raphael Levy does play Flint Hoof Boar that you mentioned there, Zach. Gives it haste with his extra red mana and attacks for 3, with which Raphael Levy takes.
So if we take a look at Marijn's hand, he's got Hellkite, Rampager, Domer Raid, Strangleroot Geist, really excellent curve. What he doesn't have is the land to cast it. And Green Mirrors, a lot of the time what you try to do is get ahead on tempo, usually by killing mana creatures or just playing more creatures with haste. If Raf's able to get that Garruk down, that's going to be a big problem for Marijn.
Yeah, and also Raf has a Soul Ring out in Elvish Archdruid right now, and the fact that he's able to this turn cast anything in his hand from Wolfir Silverheart to Garruk Relentless means that he's going to be fairly ahead, and that and the fact that he's on the play means that it's going to be tough for Marijn to come back from this.
All right, so Raf's going to start off with an Elvish Mystic, which is going to make the Elvish Archdruid that much more mana here.
Yeah, it makes it essentially free.
Yep, and it looks like he's going for Wolfir Silverheart.
I mean, and if we can place how powerful this is into context, that is already a bigger Arbor Elf due to the Archdruid attacking on turn 3 with a Wolfir Silverheart. I mean, an unbelievable start out of Levy's side.
This is basically his best draw, and I would be surprised if Domery Raid was enough to get Marijn out of this.
He's going to be able to fight that Archdruid, the Silverheart, of course, not paired with it. The question is whether that's too little too late, and a missed land drop from Marijn is not what he wanted to see right here.
Also particularly tough for a red-green deck to deal with just huge creatures, right? An 8/8 big toughness is just not a whole lot that can do it.
Right. Normally what you're trying to do is steal it with something like a Zealous Conscripts or an Active Treason, maybe try and fly over the top with a Thundermaw Hellkite, but once it's hit the board and attacking you, you're certainly not going to burn it out.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, this matchup does just come down to who can play their 5-drop earliest. They both kind of have haste, with the Wolfir letting another creature attack immediately, and the Thundermaw, actually having haste. And neither deck can really remove the other player's 5-drop.
All right, Libert's surveying the scene here, but it's a gruesome one from his perspective. He's got a 3/3 and a 1/1, but he's facing down an army.
An 8/8, a 6/6, and 2/2/2.
All right, Strangleroot Geist go. So decent blocking duty there with the Strangleroot Geist, but unfortunately potentially delaying the inevitable here, as he doesn't really have a great answer to the Wolfir Silverheart that's on the side of Raphael Levy.
And it looks like Raf actually drew a second Wolfir Silverheart. So
the hashtag the rich get richer.
Yeah.
Just it is essentially a 12/12 for 5 if you look at the total amount of power and toughness it brings to the board. Though, unlike Thundermaw Hellkite, actually can get chump blocked, by Strangleroot Geist or other ground creatures. So the red-green deck does actually have that in a race. Unfortunately, Marijn's not even racing here. He's not actually getting damage through.
Right, yeah, Marijn trying to chump block with that Strangleroot guy is going to save him 8 points of damage. The problem is, exactly as Luis said, it doesn't get him anywhere. He's going to need to figure out an answer to those 2 Silverhearts, and without lands, he's not going to be able to muster anything. And Thundermaw Hellkite, great threat along with the Hellrider he has in his hand, but 17 is a lot of damage to do when you're trying not to die.
Yeah, and if you were wondering why you might want to play the mono green deck, this draw is the answer. There aren't very many decks in the format that can beat this, assuming they're not able to kill the Elvish Archdruid.
Right. And I mean, the thing I'm looking at that side of the board right now, like those elves are attackers now that they've produced mana. I mean, Archdruid leveling them up, obviously the Silver Hearts pairing with them. I mean, not only it's a pretty big asset when your Mox Emeralds are also giant attackers.
All right, now Raph is going to play a Scavenging Ooze pre-combat here, and it looks like he's lining up his attacks. Doesn't want to play out the second Wolfir Silverheart in the first main phase here.
Yeah, the Ooze is to eat the Strangleroot when it blocks, so it doesn't come back, and he doesn't have quite enough mana to make a second Wolfir Silverheart, pair with the unpaired elf, attack, and be able to eat the Strangleroot.
Right.
So he figures stopping the second chump block off the Geist is worth, missing potentially one Wolfir Silverheart attack with the Elvish Mystic.
I don't think that's the big problem here. Well, it's one of the
It doesn't help. It doesn't help.
It doesn't help.
And with the second Silverheart in his hand, essentially having at least 4 points of haste damage, which is almost a Thunderball Hellkite attack, he's not missing out on too much by sandbagging it for a turn.
Right. Get a look at the feature match area there. The whole teams, they're all lined up next to each other. There's also a coach on each team which can bounce around and help out with tough spots. Ryan Libert's going to make the chump block here, and the Ooze is going to do its dirty deed, gobbling up that Strangleroot Geist.
Funny thing about the Scavenging Ooze is it's actually one Scavenging Ooze in Levy's deck because the Jund deck, took the other three. So he would have played more if he was able to, and he said that the card was fantastic for him.
All right, so that game was a quick one. Raphael Levy having really one of the best possible starts for his deck, and he's able to go up a game over Ryan Libert. So we're just going to stay here on this particular match. Again, we get a look at the feature match area. It's a much different dynamic than we're used to for Magic. Normally, it's one person against another person, and that person is thinking to themselves, etc. Now they get to actually converse with their teammates to try to get information. It really does change the dynamic quite a bit in the feature match area. Show off your Magic colors by purchasing new Planeswalker apparel at mtgmerch.com. These things are pretty sweet. Jace one is calling to me.
I think we'll have to get into a bidding war on that one.
Yeah, I like the other ones too, though. All right, so sideboards. What do we got here, Zach? Ryan Libert, he faced down a lot of power and toughness there very, very quickly. Does he have any way to help equalize if Raph was going to have a start like that again?
Well, definitely one of the best things that the green-red deck has going for it in this matchup is access to Bonfire the Dam, Pillar of Flame, Shock, Flames of the Firebrand if it wants it, also Zealous Conscripts. You're clearly not bringing in your Burning Earth. You might bring in Gruul Warchant if you want to push through. The question is what you have to take out. I'm not a huge fan of Domer Raid in this matchup because it's very initiative dependent anyway, and you're not likely to have bigger creatures to fight with. On the other hand, you have to do something about their Garrux. My plan would be to gain my card advantage from Bonfire the Dam and Flames of the Firebrand, use that to control their mana, and continue to try and win with your Thunderball Hellkites.
All right, Luis, what do you see for Raphael Levy? Does he have a way to combat what Zach was just describing?
I think Raph gets a lot less out of the sideboard than Moraine does, since Flames of the Firebrands, Shocks, and Pillars, and Bonfires are all kind of exactly what you want against a bunch of elves, which could leave Raph potentially cut off from playing his 5-drops. Raph does get Revenge of the Hunted, which he said was for the creature mirrors, but in general, his deck is a lot more set up to play against Moraine's main deck than they would be post-board.
Okay.
All right, we have some results coming in. We've got Manuel Danager of Austria 1-0 over Gabor Coxis. We also have Thomas Holzinger losing to Adorjan Korbel out of Hungary. The New Zealand match, meanwhile, 2 of their players mulligan to 5 in game 1. So not where you want to be if you're Team New Zealand.
We want to give a shout out to Team New Zealand. It's the evening there currently. Most of the players in the competition here and most of the fans at home are just waking up. It's pretty early here in Europe still, but in New Zealand it's actually in the evening time. So as you have your evening meal or you're sitting there watching, hello.
And apparently one of our fellow coverage reporters, Ray Walkinshaw, who's not here at this particular event, has known one of the New Zealand players, Digby Carter, for almost 20 years. So
oh, wow.
He wanted me to give him a shout out.
Take a look at Marine Libert. He's a good friend of yours, is he not, Zach?
Yeah, he is. We were on the same playtesting team starting back in 2005, 2006. I ended up making some Magic cards while he kept winning on Pro Tours. But see, 20 years old, almost 200 pro points. And really the stalwart of a Belgian team that's placed players in the top 8 of almost every Pro Tour for a solid 2 or 3 years.
Now, interestingly, he's actually not the Belgian national champion either.
No, he's actually won WMCQs for the last 2 years.
Doing it the tough way.
Yeah, exactly. Earning his wins. I hear the guy next to me won one of those one time, too.
I did. I got to play on the U.S. team last year.
That was exciting. You and Brian Kibler were sort of the headliners for the team.
Alex Bynek and Joe Panaccio, who did a fantastic job.
Yep.
And I think Marine's most impressive accomplishment might be top-8ing Pro Tour Amsterdam last time the Pro Tour was here with Merfolk. in a field full of punishing fires, nonetheless.
Yeah, punishing guy. Merfolk, a deck full of 2/2s. Punishing fire, very excellent at dealing 2 damage. He still mentions sometimes he doesn't quite know how he got to Sunday, but he figured it out somehow.
And that was one of the best top 8s that we've seen in recent history as well. It had Kai Booty, Guillaume Ofotapa, Michael Jacob, Brad Nelson, Paul Rietzel. We just had a pretty fantastic squad there.
I was really hoping that was one of the ones you were in, so you could be like, that top 8 was really awesome.
I always just think of Manatithe whenever I think of that top 8.
The one, the Miser's Manatithe, they had it in their White Winnie deck, yeah.
Against Cruel Tomato and the like.
Is what it is.
You can beat that draw.
All right, looks like players are just about ready to go. This is going to be interesting to see how this plays out as the flexibility of being 2 colors for Marine Libert. We're going to see if it's going to pull ahead of the brute power and consistency of a 1-color deck over on Raphael Levy's side.
Well, not with those hands. as we see, one of the Revenge of the Hunted, and it looks like Prey Upons as well that Raphael brought in.
So Prey Upon giving the deck access to at least a little bit of removal. Yeah. Of course, not as directly as just casting Flames of the Firebrand on your opponent's entire side of the board.
Prey Upon generally is going to be able to kill like the elves, but if you do have a Wolfir Silverheart in play or a Giant Predator Ooze, you can actually kill Thundermite Hawkeye. It's a little tougher, but it is possible.
All right, we've got another result coming in. We see Alvin Gislason out of Iceland defeating Mik Kasik from Estonia. Iceland up 1-0 in that match right now.
All right, and an update from our back table as well. Emmanuel Delvigne, he's up a game over Timotei Simino. So yeah, we're going to start to see, you'll see on the graphic there, Levy leads 1-0. Teams are currently at 0-0. That'll be updated shortly, and we'll get a feel for how this match actually plays out. This is another interesting aspect of team play is it's just the first team to get to 2 matches, and it can lead to some high fives and to some games that you're grinding out and really hoping to win, and then find out that, oh, actually we won anyway.
It is interesting, too, that Levy and Moraine are both playing such fast decks that if they finish their match quickly, they can both go help their teammates.
Okay.
And that's extremely relevant, given that both of these players are far and away the most, sort of, at least by resume, experienced players on their team.
Yeah, especially Raph.
Right,
Not short on experience. Jan Guthmann also up a game over Vincent Lammoir on our middle table there. That's the more controlling decks. All right, let's see if we have a keeps. We do. Stomping Ground to lead things off from Ryan Libert, and he's got the Arbor Elf. So a good start for him. He's got all of his colors and a Mana Accelerator to kick things off. And let's see what Raphael Levy does. Does he have the turn 1 Mana Elf? He does. Looks like an Elvish Mystic there.
It's just so powerful to be on the play in a matchup like this. I mean, you're trying to stay ahead on mana. Untapping first means you get to be the first person to sling a removal spell, first person to sling a threat.
Do you like bonfiring for 1 here?
I love bonfiring for 1 here. I think casting for more is getting pretty greedy.
I agree 100%. He's able to take Raph off of his mana and potentially really set him back a long way. And you got to remember, a bonfire is still just a card. It's a 1-for-1.
Yeah, there's a couple reasons I think that's great. One is that if you don't do that, trying to get more targets, then he plays a Predator Ooze. You basically just got time walked. Mm-hmm. And if you look at Marine's hand, he's got a Hellrider and a Thundermaw Hellkite, so he just wants to go 3, 4, 5 on his curve.
Right. Okay. Yeah, he just wants to curve out, and an Archdruid also would make that bonfire really awkward.
Exactly. There aren't that many scenarios where, as it turns out, Raf did play 2 more 1-toughness creatures, but this still worked out much, much better for Belgium by casting the Bonfire on turn 2.
Right, so Raphael Levy followed up with a Young Wolf, an excellent blocker. I don't know if he's blocked here yet. It looks like he's still deciding. The Hell Rider, though, on turn 3 here from Ryan Libert. And as you mentioned just a minute ago, Zach, the old 1-4-5, you know, he can definitely put a ton of damage on the table. And, you know, we were talking about it before. When Raphael Levy's deck works well, he's putting out huge creatures, but they're on the ground. And Thundermaw Hellkite can just happily fly over and deal huge chunks of damage for Marine.
Hellrider's not even Marine's like premier threat, but having it out this early does mean that Raf still is unable to block it at least this turn. And even if he plays something giant next turn, the follow-up Thundermaw Hellkite will get in for 6 because of the Hellrider.
Okay, so Raf does in fact block with the Young Wolf. That's going to trigger the Undying and bring it back into play. And this is going to be a big turn here for Raf Levy. I saw he has Druid's Familiar, Scourge of Avacyn Restored Limited, and here he is in Constructed.
Also known as the Green Hellrider.
Also known as the Pear Bear. He's got a lot of nicknames, and it looks like he paired up with the Young Wolf.
I would imagine so, since that not only gets to attack for 2 more, also lets you block the Hellrider on the way back.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I will say the Druid's Familiar matching up very well against Moraine's Hellrider right now. Although Moraine got ahead on mana early, right now the Hellrider kind of stopped by that Familiar. Thundermaw can still get in for 6 points of damage instead of 5, and that's relevant given that Levy is 18. But Raf has himself a pretty big board presence right here too.
Now, Luis, how much is Marine thinking about what Levy's going to do on the next turn? Because that's when he's going to hit the 5 mana level.
I think that's his primary concern, is that if Levy plays a Wolfear Silverheart next turn, can Marine race? Is he well set up to do that? I think with the Hellrider, or the Thundermaw, plus the Hellrider getting in for 6 a turn, he's in an okay spot to race, especially since he has drawn Amizium Mortars, which is another card that's pretty big in this matchup. So if he's able to maybe kick the Mortars the turn after, that could be a pretty good tempo play, but Wolfear Silverheart would allow Raf to potentially attack.
Now, I see that Marine has a Stomping Ground in hand, so if he were to play that untapped, that's going to affect the race math potentially here, but it looks like he's just going to settle for Amizium Mortars on the Druid's Familiar, and he's going to crash in there for 6 damage.
Right, it's the exact same amount of damage it would be as if he cast a Thundermaw Hellkite, except that he doesn't have to take 2 points of damage from his own Stomping Grounds.
As well as it blunts any potential follow-up attack, except for what just happened.
So 6 damage from a Young Wolf is going to drop Libert down. And let's see if he wants to continue the race or if he's even able to do that.
Really
ahead,
quick,
Zach.
a couple of results coming in from the back. We see Irvin Hosu leading David Reitbauer of Austria 1-0. Mikkel Mendel leading Digby Carter of New Zealand 1-0. And Ragnar Signarsson taking Rauno Reidma of Estonia all 1-0. So some of the matches, some of the games finishing up right here in the quarterfinals.
Yeah, especially when you're almost guaranteed to have an aggro deck among the 3, and sometimes the aggro decks play against each other. You end up with some pretty fast matchups.
Bit of a slugfest, which is what we're seeing here, really. And Marine is deep in thought on this critical juncture here. I don't know if he drew he's got 2 Thundermaw Hellkites in hand. So, interestingly, if he wants to cast one, he's going to have to tap that Arbor Elf to do so. Zach, how does that affect the math here?
Well, I mean, that is the entire story right here, because Young Wolf can attack for 6 points by itself. If he has to tap out, Hellrider can't block both Silverheart and Young Wolf. Also, if he has to chump with the Hellrider, that means that if he only has 1 Thundermaw, it attacks for 5 instead of 6. He's trying to deal increments in chunks of 6 right here, so it's exactly what he doesn't want. So Moraine very, very close to being able to eke this one out, but just not quite there yet.
Yeah, he's going to have to settle for casting Thundermaw Hellkite and shipping the turn back, and he's going to have to chump with something here.
Yeah, it looks like he's going to have to just run the double chump and go to 3 if Raf attacks with everything. So it looks like France might actually be taking an early lead here, despite both players having very good draws. Oh.
Oh, wow.
And there's a Rancor as well, which earns the handshake. Raphael Levy beating Ryan Libert in the first feature match here from the World Magic Cup. And France goes up a match.
2 blazing fast games there.
Yep. And we're We're going to take a look over at Vincent Lammoir and Jan Guthmann. Last check, we had Jan up a game in that particular match, and we'll see.
Even more updates right here. Manuel Daniger from Austria.
Looking to ignite your competitive spark? Take your game to a Grand Prix and see how you fare against the best players in your region, as well as top visiting Magic pros like Louis Scott Vargas and Zach Hill. Upcoming Grand Prix include Warsaw, Oakland. Zach, how do you say that?
Kitakyushu.
Kitakyushu.
I'll say it into the mic this time.
And Prague, thank you. For more information, visit wizards.com/Grand Prix. I will probably be at some of those Grand Prix as well. Come by and say hi.
I would love to, if I'm not demolishing the opposition.
Which you have at the last few Grand Prix you've played, by the way. All right, take a look at the feature match area. Players are, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, Luis, there's a strong team element here. They're both consulting their teammates for mulligan decisions.
Yeah, so not only do they have access to their coach, they also have access to now the people who finished their first match, Marin and Raph Levy.
Which are obviously nice advisors to have there. Now, this is a much different matchup than what we just saw. This is a much more controlling matchup. Luis, what does Jan Guthmann run in? What kind of a deck does he have?
He's got a straight blue-white deck, again, to free up some of the red cards and also to fight against Burning Earth, which a lot of teams expected to see in this event. So it actually doesn't end up that different in the mirror because most of the red cards are against aggro anyway. So you end up being able to kind of play a very similar game.
I do know that Team Belgium very confident in their mirror plan, which revolves around just playing Cavern of Souls into one of their 3 Aetherlings they're bringing in out of the sideboard.
That's a nasty sideboard tech right there.
Malaine was saying earlier, basically, their game 1, whatever happens, but they're very confident in their games 2 and 3.
All right, so we see an Augur of Bolas reveal a Dispel here for Jan Guthmann, and he's just going to pass a turn back end step. Think twice for Vincent Lammoir. And usually the name of the game here on these control mirrors is land drops, Luis.
Yeah, and the fact that Vincent played turn 1 duel, turn 2 shock land, take 2 damage means that all he has in his hand are more shock lands, no other lands, because any other land would come into play untapped at this point, which means he can't actually have that many more lands in hand, which is something, little things like that are things you would like to notice in the control mirror.
Really quick, an update from the back. Austria and Hungary tied 1-1 right now, with Adorjan Korbel defeating Thomas Holzinger 2-0, winning that match. So David Riedbauer of Austria is down 0-1. He's got to win his next 2 games, or Hungary advances to the semifinals.
Wow, that'll be a good one there. Augur of Bolas revealed negate for Vincent Lammoir. And then he played a hollowed fountain, tapped, and then passed turn back.
It's going to be interesting to see what these decks look like once Augur of Bolas rotates out.
Yeah, Augur doing really a lot of work. Not only is it able to kind of brick wall any deck that wants to attack with 2/2 creatures, it just cantrips you into more Azorius Charms and Think Twices, giving you additional mana sources, and also makes it easier to look at cards like Sphinx's Revelation.
Now we have a really interesting play here. There was a Think Twice by Jan Guthmann, and it was actually syncopated, Luis. That's pretty aggressive for the control mirror, huh?
It is, but hitting land drops, again, is the name of the game, and Syncopate is the counterspell that loses the most value going to the late game. I've definitely syncopated my fair share of Think Twices, and depending on your hand, I think it's a very reasonable play, especially since, Vincent is not, flooding with lands right now. He does expect to tap out over the next couple turns, potentially. Cards
with flashback are ideal targets for Syncopate, though. It's often just a hard counter for whatever you need it to be.
Yeah.
So Restoration Angel, while Vincent was tapped out, is going to blink that Augur of Bolas as well for Jan Guthmann.
It also helps if you know you have a negate in your hand. I've always found that I want at least one counterspell and maybe more trying to eventually fight a Sphinx's Revelation War. But he knows he's got a lot of time before Guthmann's slinging 6 and 7 mana spells to try and draw another counterspell.
Yep. So Detention Sphere with negate backup plan here as well for Vincent Lammoir is going to take down the Restoration Angel, which represented a lot of damage, and he needed to take care of it, so he did. Vincent has not missed a land drop yet. I do also see he's got one of the Aetherlings that you just mentioned a minute ago, Zach, in his hand. He does not have the Cavern of Souls to ensure its resolution currently, though. Is he going to wait for that?
Well, it's a really interesting situation right here because Guthmann has Ghost Quarter for a Cavern of Souls and an Essence Scatter for the Aetherling. So what kind of has to happen is Lammoir just needs to set up a one-shot, play a Cavern, play an Aetherling, all in a single turn. He's got the Aetherling, but he doesn't have a ton more lands. And although he has a Snapcaster, he doesn't have a way to protect his Sphinx's Revelation.
Yeah, he just drew 2 lands as well. Yeah. So it's good to be Vincent right now, as that's exactly what he needed. He plays the Hollowed Fountain, passes the turn back. This is fairly typical, of a control mirror. Not a whole lot going on. 2 Augur of Bolas staring each other down. There's a potentially down the line threatening Moorland Haunt, but there's nothing in the graveyard right now for it. Vincent's just hitting his land drops, and Jan is doing the same.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't look like a ton's going on, but there is actually a fierce battle being fought of who can miss a land drop first.
Yes.
Both players doing a pretty good job of not missing any land drops. Looks like Vincent rattled off a bunch of lands, and Jan did as well, which is really what you want. The problem is once you start missing land drops, you either have to start discarding spells, all of which are good, especially post-board, or you have to start tapping out to fight things, and that really just gives your opponent the opportunity to do what they want to do.
Well, really, one of the counterintuitive things about control fights, like normally Magic is about taking action and doing cool stuff to advance your board. Oftentimes in a control mirror like this, you want to be the last person to have to take action. As long as you're playing lands, usually you're good of just kind of saying go because you're still getting ahead on the board. It's once you start missing land drops that at some point you're under pressure to pull the trigger.
Yeah, now Vincent's just played his 10th land of the game. He has not missed one yet, and either has Jan. He's got 9 mana on his side, and here's an Augur of Bolas.
Though it looks like Jan is going to miss a land drop this turn, since even though Augur could hit him into a Think Twice, I doubt that he would really want to main phase it, just because you don't want to tap out of blue mana.
Yeah, and you definitely don't want to tap out of blue mana when your opponent's got 10 lands on the table, 5 cards in hand, and hasn't shown you a single Sphinx's Revelation just yet.
Rewind is revealed here. Perhaps not the ideal counterspell in the mirror, as it does cost 4, but hey, hard counters are hard counters.
Yeah, it's still a fine card, but it really shines against Jund and all the other decks that can't really interact with it because it's essentially free in the middle turns.
Yeah.
The card I would describe as brokenish.
All right, here is the Sphinx's Revelation for 4 on end step for Vincent Lemoine. He also has at least a negate in hand to protect it.
So it looks like to me he's trying to represent negate plus dispel.
It does look
with
like
3
that.
mana open. Is that what you think's going on, Luis?
Yeah, since Jan does know Vincent has the negate, so because he flipped it off the Augur, so it is worth leaving that up. He obviously could just tap 1 more and it wouldn't cost him anything, except I think he does want to indicate that he has that or potentially a Dissipate.
Yeah, and also Vincent knew that Jan had the Dispel. That was also revealed off of an earlier Augur. So is Vincent just setting up to try to resolve and protect an Aetherling here?
That is the plan.
All right, he's got his opponent down to 1 blue mana untapped here, and he also has a negate in his hand. Again, Jan will know that, but here it is, Aetherling.
Yeah, and Jan does actually have access to a 2nd blue off the Ghost Quarter. You don't really want to, but you don't really want Aetherling to resolve. So I think it's actually a pretty reasonable call here to Ghost Quarter into negate.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. He tapped that that plains for white mana. It's floating. He's going to replace it with an island. Unfortunately, he ends up being down a land in the transaction.
Yeah,
but
he had that Lotus Petal there.
He did, but it's certainly much better than facing down an Aetherling with mana available on your opponent's side. That's just going to be a way to end the game very quickly.
And one upside here is that if you win this counter battle, you know that Vincent doesn't have a Dispel in his hand because he would just use it. Right. So you feel like you're fairly confident to just maybe cast Sphinx's Revelation on your main phase.
All right, more results coming in. Stanislav Sivka leading Jason Chung out of New Zealand with an early Death's Hold. Jingwei Zhang from New Zealand defeating Leos Kopecki from the Czech Republic. And Michael Mendel 2-0 over Digby Carter.
And that's interesting because I was talking to Stanislav last night, and the actual Bant hybridization Young Wolf deck, which is what New Zealand is kind of playing, is one of Stanislav's worst matchups because he has 7 Diabolic Edict effects in his blue-black deck.
Not what you want to cast against a Young Wolf?
No, not so much. Devour Flesh on Young Wolf or Stranglerootgeist is not really a good exchange.
No, all right, so both Augur of Bolas attacking to push through 1 damage here for young Guthmann. Baby steps.
But yeah, and that doesn't look like too much, but it's actually kind of important because, again, it places the onus on Vincent to do something. And, a 15-turn clock, not exactly a huge one, but it makes things like later Restoration Angels threatening because you can end-step them and at least deal a couple of damage.
Yeah, great point. And here's a Restoration Angel, now that you mention it, and it's on the stack right now.
And Jan drawing Restoration Angel really does change his plan, since I think he may have wanted to, again, main phase Revelation, except since he drew Angel, which is kind of a 4-mana threat to go along with his 2 counterspells, he's not really under pressure to cast the Revelation.
It looks like Vincent's going to respond with an Angel of his own here.
Now, something I'm seeing in Vincent's hand is it Staticaster?
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
That is. I think that's there to win Angel or Restoration Angel fights.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's mostly to kill the Moorland Haunt tokens, because in a Resto fight, you just trade.
You actually kill your own.
Doesn't have a
Yeah, right. It's not a pinger. They have the same name. No, that's a really good point. So it's there for the Moorland Haunt?
Yeah, I mean, Moorland Haunt Runechanter's Pike is one of the main win conditions out of the French deck, so I think they just want an answer to that, which is interesting, I guess. Also, these decks have to have a lot of removal they just want to take out anyway.
All right, so there was a counter fight there. An attempted rewind was countered, and it looks like the Restoration Angel has resolved. And one of the best possible cards to be revealed off of Augur of Bolas, it was a Sphinx's Revelation for Lammoir.
It is funny that in this situation, either both Angels resolve or neither do, because once Vincent plays his, Jan can play his, and if Vincent lets that resolve, then the 2 counters cancel out, or Jan fights over to Angel, then the other Angel doesn't resolve. So it looks like both players end up with an Angel, and both players also have Revelations.
I think Vincent has 2, right?
I think Vincent has 1 and Jan has 2. Is that correct?
Yeah, because Vincent had to cast his earlier to try to bait out counters.
Right.
And then Jan had 1 and then drew a second one. So either way, they're both going to be drawing some amount of cards, it looks like, over the next couple turns.
More reporting from the back. Iceland leading Estonia 1-0 after Alvin Gielason defeating Mick Kasik from Estonia.
All right, an almost
classic finger tap right there.
Yeah, he almost passed the turn, and then he kind of hit the brakes on it. Still thinking.
Again, it's tough to tap out in this matchup, but if your opponent let you resolve things, maybe then now's the time to strike.
All right, here it is. Sphinx's Revelation. He's only going for 3 here, leaving a couple of mana up.
Hoping to hit a land drop and then have Dissipate up is the plan here.
Now, Vincent lets this resolve. Luis, does that mean that he for sure doesn't have a 2-mana counter?
It doesn't mean for sure, but I think over how he's played over the last couple turns does indicate that he didn't have a negate then or a dispel and probably hasn't drawn one yet.
Okay.
Do you think if he had a negate, he would use it to force through Aetherling this turn, or do you think Sphinx's Revelation is important enough that you just counter it?
Yeah, my guess is that he would rather just let the Aetherling resolve, yeah. I think that a Revelation for 3 isn't quite as backbreaking as an Aetherling. I mean, a Revelation for 5 might not be as backbreaking as an Aetherling. There's not very many answers once that actually resolves, which is why it seems like the Belgian board plan is so awesome.
Yeah, because right now all these creatures on the board just looking at each other and snap. What is this?
This is a Sphinx's Revelation.
Smaller Sphinx's Revelation.
It's for 3 also.
But this will be fought over.
And it's going to be dissipated. And it looks like that's going to... I believe that Vincent has a Snapcaster Mage, the Staticaster, and a second Aetherling in hand. All right, there it is. So, fight 1, although it is only a Sphinx's Revelation for 3. You mentioned that a minute ago, Luis. Not a back-breaking Sphinx's Revelation, but still it should give Vincent some momentum.
Yeah, and I like fighting with Snapcaster here because Snapcaster Negate, like Rewind, is not the cheapest scenario. So just getting to use it when you know it's going to work and tapping all your mana is actually all right, especially if you don't really have anything else going on.
Now, does Vincent have anything to fear here on Jan's side? Does Jan have...
As you say that.
For example, Jace Memory Adept?
Yeah, Jace is one of the good threats in the mirror. It just goes for the throat often. And since the board is fairly stalled, Jan can just try to mill Vincent out here.
So is this going to force the hand of Vincent on his turn, Zach, to try to resolve that Aetherling and be able to attack Jace in the coming turns before he gets milled?
Well, one of the things you've got going for you if you're Vincent is you've got a detention sphere right here. So if, depending on how big a fight there is over detention sphere, you can stick your Aetherling. However, one of the only things that does effectively raise Aetherling if you're far enough ahead is Jace. But your Aetherling can take out the Jace. It just has to give up a turn to do that. So it's kind of a close back and forth, depending on which one of those resolves. I think your plan, though, is to try and detention sphere the Jace first and see what kind of counter war happens over that.
Okay.
But,
yeah, I
might
agree.
See.
I think that you're going to want to lead with the sphere because it's cheaper. You don't actually, Vincent has no way of knowing that the only counter in Jan's hand is a Syncopate, but leading with detention sphere is just much safer.
And interestingly, Vincent actually has enough mana currently to lead. Even if it gets countered, he can also play Aetherling and have the mana up to blink it in case it were to become threatened in some way.
Now, I just heard some hooting and hollering from the tournament side. It looks like Hungary defeats Austria.
Wow.
2-1. Irvin Hasu defeating David Reitbauer with Archangel of Thune and Thundermaw Hellkite.
That's quite the 1-2 punch.
So, yeah, big win for Hungary there.
All right, as you guys mentioned, Detention Sphere is going to kick things off for this turn. Now, we see that that Jan's only got 5 mana up, and he just says, yeah, that resolves. So Jace down. So that's order number 1 there for Vincent Lammoir. Now, does he have an opportunity to go for the Aetherling here as well? Does the coast look clear for him, Luis?
Yeah, this could have been dangerous. It looks like he just passed the turn, so he didn't fall into the trap. But the fact that Jan just let it resolve might have led Vincent to think, oh, he doesn't have a counterspell. I'll just play Aetherling and have it get syncopated. But,
okay.
But because Vincent did draw a Dissipate, I think he's a lot more confident to just pass the turn and leave Dissipate up.
Now, what it does mean, I mean, Jace has already activated 1 time, or did Jace mill 10 or did Jace draw
it only
a card?
+1.
Okay.
So you're not really under a ton of pressure there.
Yeah, something that can happen a lot is Jace mills you for 10, all of a sudden a lot of your Sphinx's revelations get a lot worse because you're physically in danger of just running out of cards.
Yeah.
But that isn't what took place here.
And luckily, since they do have the deck list at this point, they can tell that the French list only does have the 1 Jace Memory Adept. Since Jace Architect of Thought doesn't pressure your library quite as fast.
All right, we have a huge Sphinx's Revelation from Jan Guthmann here. He's tapped out everything except for 1 blue representing Dispel here, but it's a Sphinx's Revelation for 6. And in response, Vincent's going to take the opportunity to War Leader's Helix the Restoration Angel on Jan's side, and Jan
as
says,
an attempt
sure.
to draw a potential Dispel, but I don't think Jan is biting there. No.
Do we see? Was that an island tapping and untapping?
It was kind of a pump fake there, but I think that he definitely
does have
it. Yes, he wasn't just faking Vincent out.
I think that was the classic, oh, I'm going to do this. Wait, hold on, let me ask my team. Okay, yeah, I'm going to do this.
Okay.
And the team verified that drawing 6 was good.
So there it is, 6 cards laid out on the table. One of the better feelings in Magic here for Jan Guthmann as he has completely reloaded his hand. He even gets his draw step for the turn, and he's at a pretty cushy 29 life here.
Yeah, Vincent's going to need to draw Cavern of Souls very quickly to get back into this, since Jan is fairly far ahead on the Revelation game.
Yeah, it does look like Jan only has a single counterspell. That might be a Snapcaster Mage, which can certainly take care of several. It can certainly double as more counterspells after having drawn 6 Magic cards.
Yeah, it looks like he's got a pair of Snapcasters, which gives him enough ammunition here to fight over most cards.
Big update really quick now. Czech Republic defeating New Zealand 2-0. Leos Kopecky defeating Jingwei Zheng. Kopecky basically just says, okay, my voice token is going to go all the way, but Zheng missed a top deck to deal with it, and Kopecky got the win there.
All right, so Stanislav leads his team to the quarterfinals or semifinals.
All right, we're just going to get a little bit, try to get a little better view of the well-developed graveyard here for Jan Guthmann.
With Snapcaster Mages aplenty in Jan's hand, the graveyard is basically an extension of his hand.
That's right. There's also the Moorland Haunt sitting down there, too, that could start to be activated at some point during the course of the game.
Jan saying, hey, I wonder what I have in my hand right here.
Yeah. It's funny that Moorland Haunt is a really crucial part of this deck, but Jan is so far ahead that he might not even need to activate it all that often this game to win. He's just actually just winning without even using it.
All right, now this is a big problem for Vincent Lammoir. Is that not right, Zach? It's a Rune Chanter's Pike that can represent a whole heck of a lot of damage going down the line here.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a ton of instant sorceries in the graveyard. Vincent can chump for a little while, and that Staticaster can deal with any future Snapcaster Mages or tokens, but those Augurs of Bolas can still hold a Pike just fine.
Now, Luis, why is Vincent playing Is It Staticaster right now?
Mainly because I think he's just going to either run out the Aetherling or hope to draw something to have Aetherling with counter backup. Okay. Also to draw out a potential counterspell from Jan, who's kind of flush with counters at this point. So it looks like if Jan does not have another counter, he might actually be facing down an Aetherling soon, which could make this game much closer than it was before.
Now, Zach, how many Cavernous Souls did we say that that Van Sant brings in out of the sideboard here?
It looks like he only has 2 Cavern of Souls. Now, you're drawing a lot of cards you don't want to cast Aetherling early, so 2 is more than it might seem like under a lot of circumstances. But
All right, he
the
just
reality
hasn't
is-
quite hit one yet.
Right.
And he's just got to go for it here. He's got no cards in hand and no expectation of drawing a bunch of cards in the near future, so...
Yeah, he has his opponent tapped down pretty nicely here, but with a full grip and access to not only Snapcaster mana, but also something like a Rewind or a Dissipate. He's
Well,
just got to take the risk.
I believe
think
Jan
he's out of
still has an
cards.
Essence Scatter in his graveyard. So if he hasn't flashed that back, then a Snapcaster Essence Scatter will be able to deal with the Aetherling.
Yeah.
And Vincent, I think, out of cards right here. So he's basically just like, hey, here's what I got, and can you deal with it or not?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to be in this position in the control mirror, but it looks like the Aetherling does resolve.
So now Guthmann at 29. Aetherling can deal damage in chunks of 8, but even that is a 4-turn clock, which is not something you can be too excited about when your opponent has a Moorland Haunt and a Rune Chanter's Pike on the board.
Interestingly, that Restoration Angel
Yeah,
could potentially get one hit in to try to change the clock, though the Moorland Haunt can prevent that if Jan wants to.
yeah, you'd have to actually. I think you'd have to get 2 hits in to really make a difference
Right.
here. So, and it's unlikely he's going to be able to. He might also want to chump a token with the Restoration Angel potentially. Jan also has access to a Sphinx's Revelation, so he can gain a little bit of life, have a little bit more of a cushion here.
Yeah, I mean, this is what happens when your opponent draws 9 extra cards, right?
Yeah.
He was stuck on mana early, but that meant that he drew actually a lot of actual Sphinx's Revelations and was able to win a counter more over the card drawing spells. You know, this is not a... There was once upon a time a theory where you fought over your Psychotogs, but Sphinx's Revelation, in addition to just being more card advantage than a Fact or Fiction, also just gives you a lot of life to make use of the cards that you've drawn.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons it's been so incredible in Standard.
Yeah, now
And actually Modern.
yeah, that's true. So Jan Guthmann, he did make a Spirit Token, and he's also going to equip it up with his Rune Chanter's Pike here.
And he even has the Thought Scour in hand to kind of boost it by even a little bit more.
Yeah, we can't quite see there what was hit into the graveyard. I think he drew an Essence Scatter off of it, but we'll try to get a count for how big that Spirit Token actually is here, but it is going to make short work of Vincent Lemoine's life total if he can't find a way to race it soon.
Now, interestingly, Luis, we see 3 Thought Scour in Guthmann's list. Thought Scour, a card that's kind of fallen out of favor in a lot of the blue-white-red decks. Some of the blue-white decks the straight blue-white decks play a couple of copies, but why do you think we've seen it kind of lose popularity recently?
I think that a lot of decks are playing not only like Delver's long gone at this point, but less Snapcaster mages. Some of the blue or red lists have less, especially because of Scavenging Ooze.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And I think because of Scavenging Ooze, they're less likely to want to rely on their graveyards.
So back to the match here, a big play from Jan Guthmann. He played Tamiyo, and he used it to get the Restoration Angel out of the way so that he could attack with his Spirit Token. The Spirit Token is huge. There's 11 instants and sorceries in Jan's graveyard right now. So it's a 2-turn clock against Vincent. So he is just saying, I'm going to close out this game as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I mean, Vincent has to draw something this turn or he's actually just straight up dead.
Now if Jan Guthmann does win this game, it's the match for France.
It is.
So this is a big game, and Vincent is way up against it here.
And Vincent drew a Restoration Angel, which, if it can resolve, could buy him a turn because Tamiyo can't tap anything inside combat. So it's obviously a huge long shot for Vincent here, but I think he's got to just play to his outs, attack as much as he can with Aetherling, and hope that Guthmann has a lot of blanks in his hand.
Yeah, he has the path of killing Tamiyo with Aetherling this turn, but it's not really... I don't really see him winning the game in a long game anyway. And the Restoration Angel is going to chump. It will buy him an additional turn if he does kill Tamiyo, so maybe it's worth just getting that off the board.
Sure.
But as he does now. But either way, he does need to draw something. He's going to get to blink either a Snapcaster or Augur here. And let's see, he's got enough mana to cast Angel and draw 3 cards off Revelation, assuming everything works. But it is unfortunate that he has to just main phase the Angel and hope to not get syncopated, since at this point that is one of the counters you could count on Jan potentially having.
Right.
Now Jan can syncopate for what, 1, 2, 3 here?
Yeah, it looks like he can syncopate for 3, so that does restrict what Vincent can flashback, but the Angel will potentially resolve.
And and Vincent has to decide, okay, what am I going to do with that? Again, flashing back Snapcaster could give him a Sphinx's Revelation for as many as 3 cards, but playing this is going to walk right into the syncopate that Guthmann is holding.
Yeah, which he is undoubtedly going to take the opportunity to use.
Yeah, that's what he's going to do. Syncopate for 1. Vincent can't pay for it, and it becomes exiled. But Vincent's not dead this turn, and that's a big deal here, as it's going to buy him at least another draw step potentially. Now,
potentially 2, because once his other Angel untaps.
And that is also semi-relevantly, it meant that Guthmann couldn't activate his Moorland Haunt, which is not so relevant given that he already has a Spirit token with a Pike on it. But if Lammoir can deal with that Spirit token, that'll net him 3 mana later.
All right, so Lammoir does earn himself an untap step here and a draw. What does he get?
Yeah, and Jan does have now all his mana untapped. He's
Yeah.
fully ready, and he has a Snapcaster, so he's got to be feeling pretty confident about this game.
Yeah, Lammoir is sort of exactly where he wants to be, just about 2 turns, 3 turns behind on that Etherling clock.
Yeah, and that's one of the disadvantages of losing the Revelation kind of war, is that your opponent also just ends up at a random high life total, and it just makes it that much harder to dig yourself out of it.
Yeah, exactly. Lammoir with an Essence Scatter in his hand, but he's got to worry a lot more about what's already on the board right now.
Now, there wouldn't be any Supreme Verdicts or anything left in Vincent's deck at this point.
Yeah, that would be pretty unlikely. And against the Moorland Haunt, it wouldn't even really get him out of this.
All right, so we see really quick an Iceland-Estonia match. Hedon Haraldsson leading Simon Roberts in a big Game 1 win. This blue-white-red flash Game 1 taking all of the time of all of these matches that we've seen already pan out so far. A lot of mana being tapped.
Looks like the friends deciding how much exactly to revelate for.
Yeah, and it looks like it's a ton, although it's hard to tell what he's actually tapped here.
It looks like he's doing it for 5, leaving Snapcaster Dissipate up.
It's all flashing the thumbs up. Just kind of has to sit here while your opponent draws card after card after card.
Yeah, we've entered the opponent's discussing how they're going to beat you phase, where you still have to keep playing. It's a common phase here at the World Championship and the World Magic Cup. But I mean, the reason you sit through it is, once every 100 games like this, you do end up pulling out a victory, as unlikely as it may seem.
It actually is interesting when you have multiple players too, because sometimes they'll do. All right, big top deck here for Vincent Lammoir. He taps the top. It's a Dissipate, and that's not going to do it. Vincent Lammoir shakes the hand, and we hear a big shout from the French team. Young Guthmann and company are going to be, there you go. That's what it's like down there on the floor. Big high fives, a big release of pressure, and a lot of excitement here from the World Magic Cup as France wins their quarterfinal match and advances to the semis.
And really a very decisive victory for Team France. That was 2 2-0 wins that we saw on camera through a really good sideboard plan of Vessel.
All right, welcome back to the booth. Marshall Sutcliffe with Zach Hill and Luis Scott Vargas. Great stuff. We got to see 2 very different matches. Luis, a more rampy, aggressive matchup in the first, and then a control mirror in the second.
Yeah, it was cool that the 2 aggro decks, even though there are really fast aggro decks, revolved around getting 5 drops out.
Yeah, they did.
That was really dominated the match.
Yeah, what did you think about that, Zach?
I mean, that's like the kind of magic that I was trying to make for 3 years.
You must have been a proud parent as you were watching all your kids go into battle.
I'm also a big evangelist of the Wolfer Silverheart. I think that's one of the most underrated cards in Standard, so I really love seeing it get to have its field day today.
Yeah, now we got to see a much different match there in our second one. Vincent Lammoir falls to Jan Guthmann in the control mirror. Played out how they often do, though.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is, what is your opponent, what can they cast with the mana they have up? How do you want to ration your threats and counter spells? What's worth fighting over? And in the end, Revelation was, again, the deciding factor in that match.
Yeah, now we noticed that Lammoir had an awesome sideboard plan with the Aetherlings and the Cavern of Souls. Didn't quite come together for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really excellent plan. His opponent drew a lot of Sphinx's Revelations. He wasn't able to get the Cavern of Power or to force through the Aetherling, and he set up a really good turn with an instep Revelation followed by an Aetherling with counter backup, but Guthmann had the Essence Scatter and top decked a giant Revelation.
Yeah, Guthmann ended up being able to go like Dissipate, Essence Scatter, Negate, and just, sometimes your opponents do have the triple counter when you have the triple threat.
Yeah, and that's really what it came down to here. So we see Belgium out, and France is going to be, we've got the deck list here, so we're going to keep these in the booth. This is going to be the first one that we have for sure. Now, we were looking at some of the other updates. Do we have any new ones in? It doesn't look like it. Or do we?
I think we have Iceland defeating Estonia 2-0 with Ragnar Sigurdsson defeating Rano Reidma out of Estonia. So that's Iceland advancing to the top 4 now.
Wow,
So it
that's
sounds like
fantastic.
we have all 4 of our teams potentially? Or we have Austria was defeated
by Hungary. Yep.
The Czech Republic defeated New Zealand. Iceland defeated Estonia, and now we have here France defeating Belgium.
Right. So it looks like our semifinals are going to be set here from the World Magic Cup. We're going to be bringing you all the action today from the World Magic Cup, the semifinals, also the finals, also the World Championship. We're going to get to see the semifinals of that. They're already in that. The top 4 has been set from earlier in the week, and culminating with the finals of the World Champion, where we will crown our World Champion. This is going to be a heck of a day of coverage. Hopefully, you've got your sandwiches in the fridge and a bunch of water at your side, because this is going to be a heck of a day.
That it will.
Yeah. So what are we looking at going forward here? I mean, we're going to be seeing a lot of the similar types of matchups, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of the teams did have somewhat similar configurations, so that's what we'll see over the next couple.
Okay, so we'll maybe use this one to kind of set the stage. For now, though, we've got Rashad Miller down on the floor with Team France for an interview.
Hi, I'm Rashad Miller, and I am here with Team France. Now, first, Raphael. The matchup was pretty much similar, except for, Marine having red cards in his deck. And I know historically a little bit of red and the green matchup makes it a bad matchup for the mono green deck. Tell us how that matchup usually goes and what kind of cards you usually are worried about.
Actually, it's the contrary. Mono green has the edge over the red green. Yeah, because his mana is worse, and your creatures are bigger. So you're basically racing, and you have Silver Hearts and Rancor for the trample, and the Revenge of the Hunted. So you can win the race when you're a turn behind. You can just turn the game around.
Okay. So the removal spells don't play a big part in this matchup?
Well, I don't think so. Not really. He doesn't have that many anyway.
Okay, so you're going to be in the booth at GP Warsaw. Is this win going to play any in your booth commentary?
Well, knowing about standard is definitely going to affect it a little bit. But I'm going to be in the booth with Marijn, so it's going to be... it was a little fun, because we're like, okay, we'll see. We'll meet next week in the booth, so we had to play now. But, well, it's going to be all fun.
So, Stefan, I noticed that you were really concentrating on the middle match, which is the red, white, blue mirror match. Is that something that you all identified as the key matchup to concentrate on?
Maybe the pikes. The pikes, because against Patriot decks, you are the aggressor. You are not the control deck. And the key cards before sideboard are pikes and Morlon Hunts. And after sideboard, it's the Planeswalker. And thanks to French community to discuss about this matchup, because we tested a lot, but not enough maybe against Patriot against Blue-White. But some people like Jeremy Desani, Pierre Dagen, Elie Pichon, and other people discuss with us to have a good matchup.
And speaking of pikes, Jan, we saw in game 2 the pike played a big part in you winning. But tell us what happened game 1 with the pike, because it went pretty fast, and I was expecting it to go be a pretty long game.
Vincent was pretty unlucky because he was mana screwed, so the pike was just a win more, but I was max, and after Revelation, it was very hard for him to go ahead. And I also want to thank Guru Master UV Elie Péchon, who told me all the secret take of side against this matchup. And it's thanks to him that I was able to win game 2 because it's very, very hard. He brings 3 Evelyn and 2 Cavan, and so it's really a race.
All right. And Timothy, how does it feel to be the only member of Team France to lose games?
I feel that I have the feeling that I have very great partners. I have a very good team. There's nothing I regret in my games. I just don't get the key cards in the matchup that are the discard cards. And he could resolve this disciple of Bolas with a guy on his side, so he drew more than me. And if this happened, I just lose the match.
All right, so that's Team France, and this is Rashad Miller. We're going to send it back to the booth.
Hey guys, welcome back to the booth. Marshall Sutcliffe with Zach Hill and Luis Scott Vargas. So we were just taking a look at what is ultimately going to be our next feature match, but we're going to brief you on that when we come back to the booth. For now, let's send it back over to Rich and BDM. We'll be back for more Magic action in just a few minutes. We'll see you guys in a sec.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the news desk. As you can see, we're kind of drowning in paper here. Quite a lot going on this morning, it turns out, BDM.
Absolutely. Here at the news desk, we have information for all the different teams, the decks that we're playing. We have different systems, Rich and I, for keeping track of who's here and who's not. Rich likes to mark his with a little X. Me, I like to take the people who are done and throw them on the scrap heap of history.
Wow! Wow! Oh, I bet that makes Austria, New Zealand, Belgium and Estonia feel a lot better about the morning. We are out of the quarterfinals. Pretty much, intriguingly, they all finished probably within 5-10 minutes of each other, and yet you get this third match that sometimes just never gets out of the gate. To me, the most compelling match of the entire last hour or so was game 1 of Iceland against Estonia in the blue,
which
white,
is still
red
going
flash
on somehow.
Yeah, they decided to play it out for fun.
We were having such a good time.
We were. It did eventually go 1-0 in that one, and I think that went to Iceland as well. So actually, the Iceland-Estonia was a pretty commanding win for Iceland.
Yeah, they definitely were here. Like you mentioned, very serious, very much had their game faces on, and it was interesting because the two of the more established teams in Hungary and the Czech Republic, when they won, it was like kind of full blown.
Oh my God, we won,
chest beating, and France as well. Chest beating.
Yeah.
But Iceland, it was just like,
yes. In fact, when they actually won, the player who did the final damage, he was attacking with a lot of stuff. He had Blood Artist out, he had Sacrifice outlets. It was, it was going to be there. And the Estonians extended a hand, and he was like, "I've won." Couldn't quite believe it.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
So Iceland over Estonia by 2-0. And we said that perhaps the sort of second big match of the 4 were likely to be Austria against Hungary, because you had David Reitbau there, a runner-up both in teams and individuals at Worlds. You had a Platinum Pro in Thomas Holtzinger for the Austrians, but you also had a ton of experience on the Hungarian team. And you and I remarked before the start of the match that this joker, wild card, where do you put your coach, where do you put your national champion? Hungary had gone for this approach of hands off for 75 lifetime pro points for Tamás Nagy.
So Tamás Nagy was sitting there. He had all the deck lists in hand.
Right.
I mean, he was like, okay, this, and he was air traffic control. It was very, very crisp, quiet, and deliberate. He was right there.
He was the centerpiece of the team.
Yes, absolutely.
Despite never shuffling a card in anger.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very, very interesting, that one. The way that panned out, incidentally, the Austrians, they did get a win. Manuel Danninger was 2-0 over Gabor Coxis in match 1. Holtzinger lost out to Korbel, and that left David Reitbau. He was 1-0 down by the time they got to him, if you like, and he knew it was all on him. He had to then win his second game and the third. He mulliganed in that game too, and never really put a ton of pressure on his opponent. And it felt like a match where actually Hungary were kind of, despite that win for Daninger, it felt like Hungary were in pretty good shape throughout the whole match. And that's eventually what happened. So Hungary advanced, Austria, I'm afraid not. Now, you spent quite a bit of time with the Czech team, the Czech Republic, up against New Zealand. What was your take on what was going on there? Because we had Stanislav Sivka with his 109 lifetime pro points and his 3 teammates with their 0 lifetime pro points going up against a New Zealand team that didn't have that peak but had some depth right the way through.
Absolutely. And we were watching, I was watching a match between the Hulk-faced Team Czech player who was playing Bant Hexproof.
Now that is Leos Kopetsky.
Yeah.
I have such a story for him. Okay. If you saw
Just 19 years old,
yeah,
by the way.
He's 19, and that's quite key to this, I believe. So yesterday we had the Chilean team here at the desk, and the slogan from Felipe Tapia Becerra, the Rookie of the Year, is everything's possible. You can do anything in the game. Altogether, there were 200...
He's paraphrasing Kevin Garnett. You know, all right, I really liked him up until now.
Yeah. In total, over Worlds Week, there were exactly 300 players participating. 284 in the 71 teams and 16 in the World Championship. Now that's 300 individual records of wins and losses, and let's be honest, it's mostly wins, especially when it comes to just sanctioned Magic, because it's hard to have a winning record at GPs or PTs. You're playing against the best in the world. But a sanctioned Magic, yeah, you're thinking it's a misprint. It isn't.
Are you sure?
Yeah. Leos Kopetsky of the Czech Republic is number 300 of the 300 players playing this week for sanctioned Magic win percentage. Now, what would you guess? You would think it would be somewhere, you know, around about 48 maybe. Because everyone who's good goes 50-50 at least, right? Nearly all the teams, they average about 66, 68, 70%. This is, you know, playing in pre-releases and F&M. Leos Kopetsky, lifetime, 34%.
402 and 777 and 43.
Okay, and so you're thinking, this is ridiculous. How could this possibly have occurred? But here's the thing. You mentioned he's 19.
Yeah.
And that means he's been playing since the dawn of time, and he's been playing since, you know, 5, 6, 7, barely holding the cards going.
Roughly 1,200 matches. So.
Yeah, I want to play with all the cards that have tusks on them. Or, well, today I only remembered to bring my planes with me. I'll play all the white cards in my trade folder.
Possibly an entire first year of playing with his 150 card lightning bolt deck, which I like to call the Towering Inferno.
Is that 146 mountains and 4 lightning bolts? Because that would not contribute to a winning record. And then he grows up. He keeps playing Magic. He gets better. He works his way through the ranks.
Odd to say grows up for a man who's got his face painted green for the Sunday of this tournament.
For sure. But he started coming to Grand Prix. He has a winning record in Grand Prix, obviously.
Yeah, he does. He does. He's got a 54% win percentage at Grand Prix.
Yep.
Not a large sample size. It looks like it's maybe 1 or 2 Grand Prix.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, obviously, this is by far and away his biggest stage, and he's loving every second. And he's also ensuring that you'll never recognize him in the streets of Prague because he's got this green face on. It's extraordinary.
It was a great match. He was playing bad hexproof, but when the dust settled in Game 3 of a barter in blood and other removal from his opponent, he had a 1/1 elemental token in play.
All right.
A very hexable 1/1 elemental token.
Yeah, there was no proof about that one.
Yeah, there was nothing hexproof about it. And he had a handful of auras.
As you do.
He's like, well, I got this Rancor back when he killed my Voice of Resurgence. I still have this Spectral Flight and this Ethereal Armor that I haven't been able to do anything with. Boy, I hope he doesn't have any removal. And to be fair, I mean, it's not like he just slammed him down there. There was a lot of deliberation, and finally, Stanislav Sivka, who may have mulliganed in his match just so he could have a little more time, to help out on this decision.
Do you want to shuffle my deck while I concentrate on this other match?
Yeah, it's good. You shuffle. Yeah, he was like, no, just slam it, make him have it, is basically what he said. I don't speak Czech, but I think what he said was make him have it. And the New Zealand player, kept his card in front of him. He put it down.
Yeah.
And extended the hand.
Interesting in that one, Stanislav Sivka went 1-0 up. Didn't actually get to the end of his match, but that was the match that he felt he had pretty much slim to none and slims out of town.
Yeah, Curse of Death's Toll did a lot of hard work for him against...
yeah, I saw that down very early.
The Undying Creatures.
Very early in that one. And then, of course, the match that we had on camera for you began, and, these teams, they dream about getting here for years in many cases, and then they qualify through the Magic World Cup qualifier system, and then they dream for months. And then the dream starts to become a reality as they grind their way through day one, and suddenly 39 have gone home, but they're one of 32 coming back for RTR Sealed. And suddenly the door is ajar a bit further and they're top 16, and suddenly they're in the biggest day of Magic of their lives on Super Sunday, and then suddenly 10 minutes later, a 4-time Pro Tour top 8 Moraine Libert has lost 2-0 to Hall of Famer Raphael Levy.
Grumbling about quarterfinals under his breath as he walked out of the feature match area.
Yeah, I mean, it must be, we inevitably on Sundays, we talk with winners, we talk to winners. It must be so tough to gear yourself up for day 5 of this event this week, and in 10 minutes you've lost 2-0. I mean, Moraine, barely played a card in that match where he could use all his skill and expertise and charisma at the table. And then a game of blue-white against blue-white-red, you're one down, and your third teammate sitting there, the fourth is the coach, the third waiting to see whether his cards will ever matter, and they don't. And sometimes Sunday morning can be quite a lonely place at Pro Tours and Worlds.
Absolutely.
And, yeah.
It's always interesting to me also to see how players conduct themselves in victory and in loss. The congratulatory handshake, the good lucks, the sort of, I mean, there are some wet eyes.
Yeah.
In the quarterfinals. There were some teams that, I believe top 4 is what qualifies you for Dublin.
I believe that is the case,
and
yes.
so for a lot of these players, I know for the New Zealand players, I believe they were really looking, at that extra 3 invitations to Pro Tour Dublin.
Huge prize.
I know Iceland very excited about qualifying for Pro Tour Dublin.
Indeed. Incidentally, worth mentioning, you talk about sportsmanship and the handshake. Something to watch out for later on at half-time, so that's between the World Team Finals and before we get into the World Championship semi-finals. We prepared a little video kind of looking at the 2 days of the World Championship. And one feature of that is Brian Kibler against Ben Stark. They play 3 times in that event. And Kibler has never lost to Ben Stark in competitive play before Wednesday.
Oh.
They played 3 times. Stark wins 3 times. And on the 3rd, Kibler is eliminated. And there is a shot in the video we made where you see Kibler's second handshake at the end of the 3rd match. There's a sort of, yeah, that's the end of the game handshake. And then they kind of pull all their cards together. And you see Kibler go, no, really good luck in the semifinals.
Right, the sort of perfunctory handshake, the robotic handshake, which you see a lot of times, someone extends the hand, they extend, they're like, okay, I just lost, what happened? But as he processed and realized his good friend was advancing, he found, some sincere well wishes there.
Yeah, it's a really great moment. So that's the story of the quarterfinals, but let's take you to the semis. Let's find out what's going on. Let's take a look at our bracket if we can, and we'll show you who advances and what we've got coming right up. So we began with Austria against Hungary, and there go the number 8 seed, but seeding just doesn't matter anymore. For 2 days, seeding mattered. Not anymore. It's all untimed.
Well, it still matters a little. They don't get to go first.
That's true. That is true. So there is Hungary, the 8th seed, and they will play the Czech Republic. So Stanislav Sivka will go up against Tomas Nag. Sivka in one of the chairs, Nag as the Hungarian coach.
In all of them.
Yeah, indeed. And then the bottom half of the bracket, Estonia or Iceland. Let's take a look. There you see Iceland going through to the semi-finals in a really clear-cut victory over Estonia. And finally, you saw it on camera, France against Belgium. The Belgians come up short and France advance. So we will see Iceland against France and Hungary against the Czech Republic. So let's just take a look. We've got the deck lists for the 4 semi-finalists, and we begin with Hungary against the Czech Republic. So BDM, we begin with Gabor Coxis up against Mikkel Mendel of the Czech Republic. So what are those two decks?
Well, that's an Arbor Elf mirror.
Okay.
Except that this is this is an interesting green-white deck that we have not really seen a lot of. I mean, cards like Advent of the Worm, Sublime Archangel, Sigarda, Host of Herons.
Close, but no Sigarda.
Yes.
So
Johnny Caller of the Pride. Voice of Resurgence, obviously, one of your starting points for a green-white deck.
That's right. And then on the other side, you've got your Thundermoor Hellkites, your Domri Raids, your Gorkland Rampages, Strangleroot Geist, Flinthoof Boar, 3 Mizium Mortars is in there for Mendel. So quite a lot of fireworks.
Stomping Ground versus Temple Garden.
Okay, so that's matchup 1. The middle matchup, these are very, very long deck lists, I can tell you. This is Stanislav Sivka of the Czech Republic with his extremely controlling blue-black control deck up against Ervin Hosu for Hungary. What's he running?
Well, he's playing a deck here, if you've been watching the coverage this weekend, you are well familiar with, and this is red, white, blue control.
Yeah.
Red, white, blue flash, whatever you want to call it, but the War Leader helixes that we've come to know and love, the Turn and Burn, the Counterflux, the Snapcaster Argo Bolus Restoration Angel package. Although he does have Thundermoor Hellkite in his deck, which is not something we've seen in a lot of the decks. Worth noting, Sivka's deck, the blue-black control deck, while uniquely unsuited to fighting against Young Wolf, which is what he faced in the quarterfinals, and he was very worried about. He chose this deck specifically expecting to play a lot of red, white, and blue.
Well, that's gone all right then, because that's what's about to happen. And the third matchup, Adrian Korbel of Hungary. He's playing Kessig Wolfrun, Scavenging Ooze, Huntmaster, Olivia, Thragtusk. It's all the greatest hits, obviously. Up against Lars Kopetsky, and it's Kopetsky who has this all-in aura thing going on. So you've got your Ethereal Armors, you've got your Unflinching Courages, your Rancors, Invisible Stalker, little horses to saddle up.
A difference that we don't see in the modern version of this deck that, say, Reed Duke is playing, a card like Increasing Savagery.
Ah, right, yeah.
He's playing against Jordan Korbel's Jund list, and this is pretty much the same matchup he faced in the quarterfinals, Kopetsky.
Okay, which he won.
So with a hexable elemental token.
Yeah. So that is Hungary against the Czech Republic, and that will leave us with Iceland against France. So let's take a look there, and we begin with Jan Guthmann for France. It's Stefan Soubrier, if you're wondering, who isn't playing on the French team. Ori Omerson is not playing for Iceland. So Guthmann of France, you've just seen him beat Vincent Lammoir, so we know.
But did we see him on camera? Did that happen off camera, that win? I believe it did.
The Guthmann-Lammoir?
The Guthmann-Lammoir win?
Oh, I think we had it in the end.
Okay.
Certainly had it in my ear, at the very least.
The Runechanter's Pike.
Yeah.
Just proving to be a much bigger life swing than the Aetherlings from Lammoir in the quarterfinals.
Sure. So Guthmann is up against Hedin Haraldsson of Iceland, and that is your blue-red-white. The middle matchup is Raf Levy's terrifically interesting and fun super green deck. There was a deck tech we did on that team constructed. You can look at that. And he is up against the national champion for Iceland, Giz Larsson, with Burning Tree Emissaries, Strangleroot Guys, Flinthoof Boars. There's a lot of early action in that one. And the final matchup, BDM.
Simoneau's playing Jund, and it looks like Ragnar Sigurdsson is playing Aristocrats.
For rolls, Obzedat, Skursdag High Priest, Cartel Aristocrat, Doom Traveller, some Young Wolves. That's the setup for the semi-finals. I can tell you that the players are ready, and so are we.
Yeah, absolutely.
71, not anymore, 67 down, 4 to go. Let's take you to our 3-man booth of doom. Louis Scott Vargas, Zach Hill, and first, Marshall Sutcliffe.